The champagne glasses were sweating in the humid evening air, reflecting the candlelight from the center of the table. 10 years, a decade of shared memories, inside jokes, and the quiet comfort of a life intertwined. I looked at my husband, at the man I had loved since I was 22, and smiled. He hadn't smiled back. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate sip of his champagne, his eyes cold and distant, and placed the glass back on the table with a decisive click. "I have something to tell you," he said, the words clipped and devoid of the warmth I had known for a decade. My smile faltered, my heart gave a nervous flutter. I expected a confession of a forgotten bill or a scratch on the car. I did not expect the demolition that followed. "I don't love you," he said, the sentence delivered with the flat finality of a judge's gavel. "I never have." The air in the room solidified, becoming thick and unbreathable. I could hear the blood roaring in my ears, a sound that drowned out the soft music playing in the background. "For 10 years, he continued, leaning forward slightly, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, I have played the part of the devoted husband. I endured your boring family dinners, your sentimental moods, your mediocre conversation. I did it all for one reason and one reason only, your inheritance." He sat back, looking pleased with himself, as if he had just unveiled a brilliant, long-conceived plan. "Your grandfather's fortune, that is the only thing that has ever made you interesting to me, and now I'm tired of waiting. We are going to divorce, you will get your money, and I will get my half. It's time for me to finally get paid for my decade of service." Each word was a physical blow, leaving me winded and reeling. The man I had shared my bed with, the man I had nursed through the flu and celebrated promotions with, the man who held my hand at my grandfather's funeral, was a stranger. A predator who had been studying his prey for 10 years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My mind flashed back to my grandfather, a man of sharp wit and even sharper intuition. He had been a self-made man who had built a small empire from nothing, and he was fiercely protective of his family and his legacy. He had liked my husband, or so I thought. He had been charming and deferential, always laughing at my grandfather's old stories, always asking for his advice. But my grandfather, it turned out, had seen something I had not. He had seen the flicker of avarice in my husband's eyes, the subtle hunger that lay beneath the polished surface. I remembered the day his will was read, a few years after we were married. The lawyer had cleared his throat and read the document, my grandfather's voice echoing in the stiff, formal language. The inheritance was vast, a life-altering sum of money, properties, and a controlling interest in the family business. It was all left to me, his only grandchild. My husband had squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture I had then interpreted as loving support. Now I realized it was the triumphant grasp of a victor. But there was one more part to the will, a peculiar clause that had seemed like a strange, sentimental quirk at the time. The lawyer had read it with a slightly puzzled expression. "To my beloved granddaughter," it said, "I leave my entire estate with one binding condition. This inheritance is contingent upon the continuation of her current marriage. Should she ever divorce her husband, for any reason whatsoever, the entirety of the estate, down to the last penny, is to be immediately transferred to the charitable foundation bearing my name." My grandfather, in his infinite wisdom, had seen the predator at my door. He couldn't stop me from marrying him, but he had built a cage around my fortune, a cage designed to trap a gold digger. He couldn't protect my heart, but he had forged an unbreakable shield around my future. He had made it so that the only way my husband could benefit from the inheritance was to remain a loving, devoted husband for the rest of his life. Divorcing me would be the single most unprofitable decision he could ever make, and he had no idea. He sat there, across the table from me, basking in the glow of his supposed victory, planning a future financed by my family's money. He saw the tears welling in my eyes and mistook them for the tears of a heartbroken victim. He didn't see the gears turning behind them, the cold, hard machinery of a plan beginning to form. My initial shock was being rapidly consumed by a glacial rage. He thought he was ending the game. He didn't realize my grandfather had set the board years ago, and I was just now understanding the rules. I could not divorce him. If I did, we would both be left with nothing but his smug satisfaction and my broken heart. But I didn't have to. I could stay. I could play the part he had assigned to me, the pathetic, spurned wife. I could let him believe he held all the cards while I held the one that would trump his entire hand. "Please," I whispered, letting a tear trace a path down my cheek. It wasn't entirely an act. The pain was real, a raw, gaping wound in my chest. "Don't do this. We can work it out. I love you." His face softened into a look of pitying contempt. "It's too late for that," he said, his voice sickeningly gentle. "It's just business now. Don't make it messy." Oh, I thought, a silent, vicious promise forming in my mind. It's going to be messy. You just have no idea who is going to be cleaning it up. I would not give him the divorce he so desperately wanted. I would not give him the satisfaction. I would chain him to me with the very golden shackles he had so eagerly tried to steal. He wanted my inheritance. He would have to stay married to me to get it. He had confessed his sins, expecting absolution in the form of a massive wire transfer. Instead, he had just handed his warden the keys to his cell. The anniversary dinner was over, the marriage was over, but the performance of a lifetime was just about to begin, and I would make him pay for his ticket every single day for the rest of his miserable, greedy life. The days that followed his confession were a masterclass in psychological warfare, with him as the bumbling amateur and me as the silent, calculating grandmaster. I adopted the persona of the broken but hopeful wife. I cried at strategic moments, not the loud, messy sobs of a woman truly falling apart, but the quiet, dignified tears of one clinging to a shred of hope. I would leave old photo albums open on the coffee table, silent testaments to the good times he had just confessed were a lie. I would cook his favorite meals, an act of supposed devotion that only served to feed his burgeoning ego. He lapped it up. He saw my behavior as proof of his own irresistible charm and my desperation as confirmation of my weakness. "You see," he'd say with a patronizing sigh after I'd pleaded with him to reconsider, "you can't live without me, just sign the papers." It's for the best, but I would just shake my head, my eyes brimming with manufactured tears, and whisper, "I can't, I still believe in us." His patience, already thin, began to fray. He wanted his payday, and my refusal to cooperate was an infuriating obstacle. He started to escalate his tactics, believing that if he made my life miserable enough, I would have no choice but to file for divorce. The casual cruelty became a daily routine. He would talk on the phone with his mistress in front of me, his voice low and intimate, discussing their future plans, the house they would buy, the trips they would take with their money. He started spending with a reckless abandon that was breathtaking. The inheritance in his mind was already a liquid asset, a bank account just waiting for a signature. He bought a new sports car, a sleek, obscenely expensive machine that he parked in my grandfather's garage. He took his mistress on a lavish trip to the Caribbean, sending the bill for the five-star resort to our joint credit card. He invested in a friend's risky startup, a sure thing that would double our money before the divorce was even finalized, and I, the dutiful, heartbroken wife, encouraged it all. "That car looks so good on you, darling," I'd say, my voice laced with a believable sadness. "You deserve to be happy." When the credit card bill for the Caribbean trip arrived, I looked at it with wide, wounded eyes and said, "I hope you had a good time, it's just so expensive." He would scoff, "It's a drop in the bucket compared to what's coming, stop worrying about money, it's unbecoming." Unbeknownst to him, I was a meticulous bookkeeper of his downfall. Every receipt, every credit card statement, every wire transfer for his foolish investments, I photocopied and filed away in a locked box in my closet. I wasn't just letting him dig his own grave, I was measuring its depth and width, cataloging the specifications of his ruin. While he was gallivanting, I was quietly meeting with my lawyer and a financial advisor. I wasn't planning a divorce, I was planning a containment strategy. Following their advice, I began to legally and financially insulate myself. I separated our bank accounts, a move I explained to him as a temporary measure to get our finances in order, which he readily agreed to, assuming it was a step towards the eventual division of assets. He was too arrogant to see that I was actually building a firewall, protecting my own small, personal savings from the inferno of debt he was creating. I also hired a private investigator. Not to gather evidence of his affair for a divorce I would never file, but to get a clear picture of the promises he was making and the financial entanglements he was getting into. The investigator's report was grimly satisfying. My husband had promised his mistress not only marriage and a mansion, but also the seed money for her own boutique business. He had borrowed money from shady lenders against his expected settlement. He wasn't just spending the inheritance he didn't have, he was taking out mortgages against a house that didn't exist. He was a man running on the fumes of his own greed, completely oblivious to the cliff edge just a few steps ahead. The pressure cooker I was carefully maintaining began to hiss. The initial thrill of his rebellion was wearing off, replaced by the gnawing anxiety of his mounting debt. Creditors started to call the house. His sure-thing investment went bust. He became more volatile, his moods swinging wildly between arrogant dismissiveness and panicked rage. His cruelty intensified, no longer a calculated tactic but the desperate lashing out of a cornered animal. "Why are you doing this to me?" he would scream, his face inches from mine. "Why won't you just let me go? I'm suffocating." I would just look at him, my expression a carefully crafted mask of sorrow and confusion. "Because I love you," I would say, the lie tasting like sweet revenge on my tongue. "I can't give up on our marriage." He was trapped in a gilded cage, rattling the bars, screaming at the warden who looked just like a victim. He thought the marriage was his prison, the one thing standing between him and his fantasy life. He had no idea that the marriage was his only lifeline, the one thing keeping his creditors from pulling him under completely. He was drowning, and he was begging me to let go of his hand, not realizing I was the only thing keeping his head above water. The more he struggled, the tighter my grip became. I was no longer just the keeper of my grandfather's secret, I was the architect of my husband's fate. He had wanted to get paid for his decade of service. I was about to present him with the bill for his treachery, and it was a debt he would spend the rest of his life repaying. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a man in a cheap suit with a clipboard. He was there to repossess the sports car. My husband, who had been on a frantic, hushed phone call in his study, came storming out to see the tow truck backing up our driveway. The public humiliation was more than his fragile ego could bear. He didn't yell at the man from the repossession company. He saved his rage for me. He cornered me in the kitchen, his face a grotesque mask of fury, his voice a torrent of blame. "This is your fault," he screamed, sweeping a vase of flowers off the counter, sending glass and water shattering across the floor. "All of it, if you had just signed the papers when I told you to, none of this would be happening. I'd have my money, we would be fine." He paced the room like a caged tiger, the confession he had so coolly delivered months ago now a frantic, desperate rant. "I'm ruined, do you hear me? I owe people money, people you don't want to mess with. I promised my girlfriend a future, a life. You've destroyed everything with your pathetic, selfish refusal to let me go." He finally stopped in front of me, his chest heaving, his eyes wild with desperation. "This is it, it's over, I'm leaving, and I'm taking you to court. I will drag your name through the mud. I will tell everyone what a cold, vindictive woman you are. I will get my half of that inheritance if it's the last thing I do." This was the moment, the culmination of months of silent planning and feigned weakness. I didn't flinch, I didn't cry. I let him finish, letting the silence hang in the air, thick with the stench of his self-pity. Then I walked calmly to the study, unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk, and retrieved a document. I walked back into the kitchen, stepping carefully around the broken glass, and handed him the stapled pages. It was a copy of my grandfather's will. "What is this?" he sneered, snatching it from my hand. "Trying to show me how much you're worth? I know what it says." "You should read it again," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Pay close attention to page 4, section C." I watched him as his eyes scanned the page. I saw the flicker of confusion, then the dawning horror. I saw the exact moment the words registered, the precise second that the full, catastrophic weight of his miscalculation crashed down upon him. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly, grayish pallor. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The paper trembled in his hand. He understood. He finally understood the elegant, inescapable trap my grandfather had set, and the patient, terrible vengeance I had just executed. He realized that for the past several months he had been bankrupting himself in a frantic attempt to get half of a fortune that would turn to smoke the very second he achieved his goal. "No," he whispered, the word a ragged exhalation of disbelief. "It can't be." "Oh, but it is," I said, my voice as cold and sharp as a shard of the broken vase. "My grandfather was a very wise man. He saw you for exactly what you are." He sank into a kitchen chair, the wool slipping from his grasp and fluttering to the floor. The fight was gone, replaced by a hollow, vacant despair. He was ruined. If he left me, he walked away with nothing but the crushing mountain of debt he had accrued and a line of very angry people waiting to be paid. If he stayed, he was bound to a woman who knew his most shameful secret and who now utterly despised him. There was no escape, there was no victory, there was only the quiet, suffocating checkmate I had just delivered. I let him sit there for a long time, stewing in the wreckage of his own greed. Then I laid out the new terms of our arrangement. "You are not leaving," I stated, not asked. "You will sell what little you have left to start paying back the money you owe. You will get a job, a real job. And every single paycheck will go towards clearing the debt you so foolishly created. You will live in this house, my house, not as my husband, but as my tenant. You will have your room and I will have mine. We will be strangers under one roof. I will not divorce you. I will not free you. You wanted to be paid for your 10 years of service. Your payment is this life. You will live every single day with the consequences of what you did. You are my prisoner and your sentence is lifelong." He just stared at me, his eyes empty. The arrogant predator was gone, replaced by a broken, pathetic shell of a man. The cruelty, the affairs, the deception, it had all been a gamble and he had just lost everything. My grandfather couldn't save me from the heartbreak of loving a lie, but he had given me something far more valuable, power. He had given me the means to not just survive, but to triumph. I had lost the husband I thought I had, but in his place I had found a core of steel within myself I never knew existed. My husband is still here. He works a demeaning sales job, his flashy suits replaced by cheap polyester. He comes home every night to a silent dinner and the cold, indifferent presence of the woman he tried to swindle. Sometimes I see him looking at me, a flicker of the old hatred in his eyes, but mostly he just looks tired. He looks like a man serving a life sentence. He wanted my inheritance, and in a way he got it. He is forever bound to it and to me, a permanent living monument to his own greed, and I am the warden who walks free. Thanks listening this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Share this story with your friends and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Revenge Laura for more episodes.